Okay, so today we're going to talk about breaking into the tech interviews. Some of the attendees who will be joining us are the mentors who work with us at Philly Talent. We'll have a good crowd of people who are some people might be experts, Kaggle experts. We'll have a good crowd of people who might be candidates or current candidates or candidates who want to join. So it would be I look forward to the Q&A towards the end of the session, and want to make the contents useful for everybody. So as the title says, we're going to talk about breaking into tech interviews. And in the meantime, over the next 10 slides, I'm going to propose how we do it at Philly Talent with our mentors, working with our candidates. There's a lot of things to track, and we're going to talk about those in detail. So Philly Talent, what we solve at Philly Talent, we fix the problem of accreditation, especially we focus in data science job market. That's one of the key reasons we consider this problem one of the biggest issues that the talent in the field are facing, because with the growth of the boot camps and a lot of the online programs, we keep seeing that a lot of talents have almost the same background. So how do we fix that? We build a verified portfolio for our candidates in 100 days. So that's not all candidates, because we also we have a good crowd, about 3,000, 4,000 data science crowd. And some of them already have a very considerable portfolio, a very competitive portfolio, but they might need help in order to refine it and basically work on that remaining 20% of what we call that could be a job-ready resume profile. We have different kind of case scenarios. I'm going to give you some ideas of how we consider them. So for example, we have one case scenario is 1 or 60%. We call it 1 or 60%. So that's someone recently graduated from two-year online program, also has a 4-year STEM degree. He's interested in cybersecurity, anything data. Most of the time that matches with data analyst jobs or business intelligence job. And he has a major profile, so resume and references and so forth. So basically 60% is done in terms of getting and landing the job. We are going to be working on that remaining 40% with our community or of professional experts and professional mentors and competition platform experts. We refine, in this case, and our focus is on mock interviews, usually it's a mix of technical, it's usually 80% technical interviews and 20% screening interviews. The technical interviews especially becomes more important when the talent, the candidates have really not been coding and do not have a hands-on experience or lack, let's say, good practice or Pythonic ways of doing things, if Python or it's my focus if someone is working with Java or what is the correct way in doing it in Java. So that's one. We have different case scenarios like this case that I explained, and I'll be happy to go over it in details. And that's the first step that you have to identify for yourself as a candidate. Where do you stand? Are you somebody who, if you are over that, if you already have a job, you probably know already what is it that you need in order to get to where you want. And we have cases like that too that work with us. We also like to work with these type of talents and have them join us. But if you don't, how do you evaluate that? And that's the key ideas that we're going to work in the next few slides. So very quickly talking about the executions and how we come about this solution of what we're proposing and how we do the refining and building this portfolio. We leverage platforms. So we leverage as many platforms as we can, primarily because the quality of the data and the quality of problems that are out there is 100%. We don't need to doubt that. We assign topics based on what the talent needs. And let's say, for example, some talent is going to be working in healthcare or insurance industry, so the Hadoop ecosystem is what we need, or a plethora of applications around several different kind of applications that it needs to be leveraged around GitHub ecosystem, like CI/CD tools and so forth. We assign those topics We work towards implementing and developing and monitoring, mentoring, basically, that these the good practices are enforced, secure development cycles are enforced, and so forth. And eventually, we were going to update the major profiles, which for us and for most candidates, it's GitHub, LinkedIn, and Kaggle, or if there's any other platform they use that is their competitive advantage, then you can use that. Oh, just one second now. Okay, so we need to make sure that I'm on. My battery charging. Okay. All right, I'm going to, oh yeah. Just need to make sure that we have, I cannot have my laptop crashing here. Okay. All right, so what are the top challenges? When you understood that, let's say your case, your profile matches a business intelligence analyst job and your 4 year of engineering or STEM engineering type of work, which is my focus is working with talents who come from the engineering background or talents who come with a statistics background and you wanted to do data scientist roles. So these are associate level or mid-level positions. These are the focus that I work with. And we'll have different kind of mentors presenting in the following weeks. And they will probably be able to talk more about their own cases. Okay, so what are the top challenges that a candidate that I work with, that most of the candidates that I work with is in the same order, is not having a supportive professional network. So that basically means that you feel alone on your own. Lack of tested training, it's in the technology stack that you're supposed to work on, whether it's simple APIs that needs to be connected to some ecosystem, where, for example, Spark, depending on what type of languages, solutions, libraries could be connected to, that could surprise some candidates in some interviews. Basically, it is failing the technical and on-site interviews, or if there's a presentation that they have to do on the on-site, they do not have much interesting thing to talk about. And lacking experience, this is like a during the for the screen call, that's another one. If I could say, if I remember the percentage, it's almost the top 3 I have are almost the same, around 15%, 20%. And then the last 2, finding the resume fit, basically not having enough time or not applying at the right time. The job market is seasonal. Also in these different seasons, whether you are still a candidate that has not got any offer or not really affects your odds of getting to the next stages. So there are a few things that more than just there's also timing. Basically what I want to say is there's also timing that plays a role. And finding the resume fit takes time, a lot of time. Applying is ultimately what matters. You need to apply and knock on doors to get any feedback and results. And finally, like not having long-term or career strategy. The other item we have for that is not having a proper job application routine. There are a few applications that you can track your routine and make sure that you're consistently applying to a minimum number of jobs during the week, keeping track of some stuff. So that's not having those, or having those could solve it. But at the same time, most of our talents, most of our candidates lack training, and they want to get more confident in the design and the topics they discuss, in how they discuss their past experiences, how they present it, without confusing somebody on the other side, and at the same time want to be taken seriously. So that's one of the key challenges that we work on. The other 2, the screening call is very important. It happens especially with people who have a very strong technical background. They do not know how to properly address and navigate a phone screen conversation with a recruiter or who is not technical. And that's very important for several reasons. But it very often is also a sign that the person has not been doing much work in a team and lacks communications, especially when it comes down to technical issues or things that is have multiple different competing requirements, competing teams with different type of deadlines or aspirations and so forth. So that level and those layers of sophistication in the technical workplace is very important, and it is a very simple sign of maturity. And a recruiter who is experienced enough can easily pick up on those. So after working on the technical mock interviews, which we can really easily see how a person is hands-on, and then that's a very important skill. Especially the talents that come with a computer science background, they are expected to be very familiar with algorithms. We're going to go over the details of this. Why is that? Regardless, you need to know if you're using a tool, how that tool is properly going to use its methods, how it's probably going to use its existing libraries and so forth. So that's what should be what we monitor and verify during the technical training mock interviews. And then, as I mentioned, the screening calls. So how would you do that? And especially the whole process that starts with the screening calls, right? You apply to a job, few jobs. Hopefully you avoid jobs that have a lot of applicants. You find a job that is a good resume fit, have like 20, 30 applicants in it. And you see a good fit between what you have been doing in the past and that job, and you apply to the job. What is the first thing that happens? So the first thing will be the phone screening interview. Okay, so there will be a screening call. The screening call has several rules. First of all, it's designed for a recruiter or an HR to understand if this applicant is real, it exists. People don't forget that. That's a big part of the screening call. The screening call is not supposed to be too long. Have to really get to the bottom of how working with Zoom, making sure that I have control over the videos and audios. Okay, excuse me. So sorry about that. The screening call does not always need to be 30 minutes, 25 minutes. A successful screening call could be very short. You can track it and approach it from different ways. But what is very important for a candidate who is going into the tech market, especially for the first time after graduation, is to have some structure. So how do you create this structure? What we do at PhillyTalent is we create some assumptions, some major philosophies. We put that in place first before going and giving anybody, our mentors, or anybody else, our candidates, a solution. Those assumptions that we want to put out is here. So we say we have to be in charge. I'm going to explain what that means. A candidate should be in charge of the phone call. None of what we do or a candidate does, or none of these slides will make sense. And if you think that you're just one person in 1,000 and you have to just see how things are going to happen over that 5-minute, 10-minute phone call. No, you have to be in charge of that phone call. And a lot of good recruiters have a very consistent flow to the way they conduct their phone interviews for roles. So it's based on roles. If it is, like, say, data scientist roles at a senior level, or if it is a data scientist role at the entry level, it's usually the same. But if it's a different kind of role, let's say a business intelligence role or just a software developer role on Python, it might be different. But within the application, within your field, that should be the same field you're applying, let's say data analyst role, if that's the case, you will be dealing with the same kind of flow. And the only thing that will change will be the person who is conducting it. The recruiter will be the person, or the HR person will be the difference. So you need to be in charge, and we want our candidates to be in charge of the process. We assume that's the case. And we're going to explain how that's possible and what do we mean by that. The other part is to keep focus on the why versus the how. Now that's more complicated, but a very simple example is, let's say if you are if a recruiter will get a lot more regarding what you do and how you do it if you start by explaining why you did it that way. Let's say you build a model, and in your model you use Python, and in the existing structure was using Torque and IBM GPFS and some batch systems and Hadoop just on premise. Then the best way that you can explain why your way using the existing tools was benefiting the whole team is going to tell that experienced recruiter a lot about if you're a good fit for that job or not. So especially if you know that you are a good fit for that role, start by focusing on the why versus saying, we have like, that's one thing I want to my candidate to avoid is explaining their methods. Like, what is, like, they say the name of the library in the Python, and then they say, oh, this is a Python library that you do this and this and that with. No, you don't need to explain that. Or if you could get less details in terms of how you did it, but primarily make sure you focus on the whys. And as you grow in your career and as a candidate, that becomes more valuable and important, and also benefiting you more in becoming raising and going to the next levels in your career path. Anyway, the other part is the other assumption, the other third foundation is you want, as a candidate, want to make the recruiter job easier. You want to make them do what they basically need in order to get done. And that's a part of the lessoning that you as a candidate need to do. For example, what is an actual question that the technical or screening interviewer asked you? After you explain what you've been working on, after you got the introduction and so forth, understand that better than what they wanted, and solve that problem, solve that question for them. Sometimes that's all they need. They already like your resume on LinkedIn. They already like your backgrounds. And now they're just wondering if you, let's say, if you're miserable at your job, or if you like your job, or but you want something better with a higher pay. They just want to understand that. And that will tell them everything with regard to, like, how much this talent would cost me. Would it be expensive talent candidate, or would it be, no, great cash for me as a recruiter? That is very key to always make their job easier. Also, it's a good mentality to have, because it's going to make your job as a candidate more clear, and would stop you from things like overselling or talking too much. Another key point, the last one, is practice clarity. And what do we mean by that? So that's what we believe, that there should be a program, there should be structure to how a candidate does this routine. So the way we do it with our candidates is we use 5 steps for our screening calls, which is basically, I'm going to talk about it in the next slides. The mock interviews, we perform mock interviews, technical mock interviews. We use HackerRank's CodePen. We we test on if the talent is going to be a developer as an entry-level developer, we'll make sure that their certain CS concepts are in place. So that's where the goal of the mock interviews. We perform daily checklists. This is important. I'm going to talk about it later, more about why it is important to have a daily. And we do tracking tools. Obviously, we track a lot of results. You can track things for yourself as well. Also, we want to leverage platforms and specialized profiles. So what we mean by specialized, by the way, is simple. So for example, on your LinkedIn, we don't want our candidates to keep talking about the projects they did. What matters for us is that they mention the title, the company, the year and time and place. That's all. We don't want it to be too much details and bullet points on the LinkedIn. That's what goes into the resume. So we want to keep these things separate. That's what we mean by specialized profiles. So for GitHub, if the talent is very hands-on and it's going to be coding, needs to have a GitHub that is updated and maintained, and the repositories are of set minimum quality. And a lot of times, actually, just the refining is what we do. So during the onboarding, evaluation of the talent, and or if on other stages, we find, for example, the GitHub repository, we make sure that they have certain requirements in place. I'm going to talk about that more. This ultimately hopefully gives you as its candidate sort of a self-awareness. You become good at it. You become consistent. You sort of start to understand that you feel like you're in charge of this, and you have a goal. You want to make sure that you're. We're going to talk about different goals. You can set your goal. Let's say it's making sure that the recruiter sees your resume, checks your resume, and you start to track that, and you get good at this. So that's a very good good approach to have as a candidate in the tech market to break into, especially if you are new to tech. If you have not done it, you come from a sales background, and you want to do an entry-level business intelligence role. This is going to heavily help you, as it is is a competitive market, and obviously that's why you want to switch. One of the key reasons that people want to switch is that the salary and the good things that comes with it, and with that comes the competition. So this will give you a good structure to have and get good at it as you go to different jobs. So now, why do we need what is the role of the 5 steps? The 5 steps that I mentioned is what we use at PhillyTalent to do the screening phone interviews, which is one of the major problems that candidates have, not having practice and that's the structure that we have. Why do we do that? How do we use that? I give you one example that is very common for candidates. So they come to say, I applied to 10 jobs yesterday. And okay, 10 jobs yesterday. We look around and we see that in the past week, you applied to 50 jobs. We dig deeper and we see, okay, the talent have been using Easy Apply, which is very, very easy now to do. You just upload your resume. You want two clicks, you apply to the job. And then when we check into the job application, half of the jobs that the talent applied is over applied, like more than 100 people have applied for that job. That doesn't count. And that's the key sentence. What counts and what doesn't is only makes sense if you have a structure, if you have a sort of a step-by-step routine that you can do. And the first step, as I said, is a phone screening, and the first structure that we practice with our candidates is 5 steps. But this kind of structure is going to help you in counting what actually matters. So that next time when you explain to yourself, hey, I applied to 10 jobs, we actually know you did not. You just applied to 4 jobs because 6 of them were just not good or for different reasons. So let's just start with the first structure we want to ask to every candidate to have during the phone call. It's called 5 steps. 5 step is basically a cover letter. Cover letter, most talents are familiar with that. It's what you use when you apply for an undergraduate or a master's level degree. It's something that asks your resume. We ask for their talents, candidates, existing cover letter. It's usually 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph is always like, I'm really excited about this job. I'm very hardworking. I'm a great guy. The second paragraph is like 15 lines telling everybody what softwares they used, what packages they've used, in a lot of details. And the last one is, I'm really happy to talk here. This is my phone number. This is my resume, and so forth. So that's a classic cover letter that does not work in tech because everybody uses it. It doesn't add and help the recruiters when they get it. Also, a lot of platforms like LinkedIn or Indeed Prime have their own version of cover letter. So what we call it is 5 steps. The 5 step is a consistent structure that better helps you start the process strong and helps you to be in charge. It consists of the 3-part introduction, short story, and resume breakdown. The introduction is what, for example, you go explain who you are as a person, and you're an applicant for the role, and you're talking to the right person, basically. The shortest story is why you're applying to that role and what you've been doing in the past 6 months. And the resume breakdown is just the tip of the iceberg of what you've been working on. Not a 10-minute, not a like 1 minute detailed of what you've been going for the past 10 years. This whole 3-stage should get the recruiter or the HR engaged. So you have to have some pauses. We're going to talk about how to get the recruiter motivated during this stage 2. And you want to make sure that the recruiters are still with you. You don't want to just start by saying one thing and just keep talking. The common objections that comes in tech, we're going to talk about that. And then finally, the review part, the rehashing part, and basically use as shaking hands. Thank you so much for your time. Depending on how the conversation goes, is the last part. So few things to realize, and we're going to repeat this in different ways in this slide, is that the recruiter is in charge of the process. He has a decision to make. Most of the time, the decision is made, and the recruiter, and you're probably not on the top list. Okay, if you really apply ambitiously, unless you just always apply lower than what you are, and you're always on the top list. But let's say you want to get a raise, or you're applying to jobs, and we're talking about a case that you might not be on the top 20%, and you are one of the backups. These are the cases that you can leave an impression on the recruiter, and remember that it is because the impression matters, because he's the person in charge. So very simple things we practice, and you can add to this for yourself, like be engaged, be enthusiastic, have a smiling face. It passes and goes through the phone. This is for the phone call. We're talking about a screening call with a non-technical recruiter here, by the way. These are important things that we pass to our candidates who did not have much experience applying to jobs. This is the first job they are applying to. And they are very helpful. Very quickly, it helps them to land more job and hear back more. Land more follow-up stages and get more technical screening. Another thing is when you go over the 5 steps, one of the things we want to realize for our candidates is to make them self-aware of the way they speak and the way they present themselves. And what does it actually mean when the recruiter says, like, okay, is it a good time to talk? Or I'm gonna talk back to my team. Most of the time it means like you're not gonna be selected. And if you want to make a push, that will be your chance to turn it around and practice some skills to rebuttal that. So overall, it's a consistent structure, as I mentioned earlier, to practice, review, and repeat the screening call experience. Now, as you practice your applications to different jobs in tech, it is important that you track your performance and how you are doing. Now, track daily, especially when you start doing it. It's very important that you track daily. We have tried it in different formats in the past 2 years. Now we do it for 2 weeks, 6 days in a row, and sometimes the talents cannot do all the 11 days or 2 weeks in a row. But we make sure that for at least 2 to 3 weeks, we track this progress daily. Now, in terms of what you track, we track the profile updates for the technical talents that I work with. I measure GitHub on how they work on commits. Now, the commits on a GitHub is not the best way to track if the guy is actually coding. There are better versions of this. Let's say how many people are forking your code. But we're talking about a very short amount of time, 100 days, and building new habits here. Getting hands-on, getting more hands-on. So the number of comments for us does. Most of the talents that work with us, that work with me as a mentor, they either have a very strong background in GitHub or no, they do not have. And that's because like I work, so that's the reason the plot that I showed you here looks like that. They either come from a technical background, it's computer science background, so they're familiar with GitHub, they work on it every day, or they're coming from an engineering background, as I mentioned earlier, or marketing or some non-technical field, and they don't use it at all. regardless, just because of what I'm going to talk about, the rate of APIs, it is very important to get this skill habit for yourself. Code versioning. GitHub is more than just code versioning. There's a whole ecosystem around GitHub. It's one old saying of GitHub is to just have multiple people commit to the code. Now you have different Kanban tables connected to that. ZenHub is there. And a lot of different tools that you might be on a product team or design team and be using the terminology and the tools there helps you. So that's what we count. Another thing we count is request schedule count. Another thing we count is HackerRank. HackerRank has a lot of different features for reviewing code that the candidate does and finishes the assignments. We heavily use that. That's a big part of the tracking you'll be doing this first 3 weeks. Very quickly, we can just evaluate how hands-on is the talent and how much work we have in front of us. You can just easily say in the first two mock interviews, technical interviews, very easily. CodePen is good for some other applications, especially for some web tools. I'm going to talk more about it if there was anybody asking questions about that. The technology stack, we have a list of technology stacks, about 100. For example, CI/CD is one, on GitHub is one technology stack topic. S3 on AWS is one technology stack topic. We have a 60-40% rule, which means like if you're spending any time on using and learning about technology stack, put 60% of your time on things you already know, and then 40% of the things you don't know. So let's say, for example, you want to actually learn about Spark, okay? Then the best way would be to understand how, like some libraries like on R or Python, if there's any wrapper on Python or R that connects with this API, and use that first with your existing problems that you're solving, you have solved before, okay? And then go with complete pure Java API or other APIs, Spark APIs. So that's what we mean 60%, 20, 40%. Also, it's very helpful for, like, I'll give you an example. If as a computer science candidate needs to put a good amount of time working on dictionaries, lists, tuples, different forms of classes on Python and their attributes and their methods before learning about, let's say, object-oriented design in Python. So that's something that we mentor, we assign it, we track it, we make sure that it is there in place so that candidates can pass the technical interviews and so forth. Again, like the idea is do as many as you can. So I put some numbers here so you can see, like, for the tracking part, as I mentioned earlier, the most important part is for us to build that habit of being consistent and working. That's what we do. So we just have like 3 levels of fair, average, excellent, you know, we have a good percentage that are excellent on HackerRank, and some of them are previous to have like the same profile. So it's they change. They might start with being very low, not very good. They move to average, and then eventually they get to the level that is pass. They are ready to actually put full energy on applications and job applications, and be ready to smash the technical interviews. I also put the resume technology knowledge. So that's something you need to educate yourself of what it means when people talk about ETL, or what is the difference between like Azure Cloud Solution and AWS, if you're interested in, if you're going to be in cybersecurity. You educate yourself, and we educate our candidates about these topics. And then the professionalism, that's a big part that we have, and it's we can talk about it of how to do that, but it's an important. These are just 3 examples, but we do about 20, 30. Like if I count the hacker ranks and the technical part, that's over 100 things that we can track. We are now starting to use some of the pieces of the recording of our candidates to understand like what is let's say the number of times they use words like graduates or I graduated or lesson or assignment, things that makes you in front of a recruiter just of a fresh talent with no working experience, right? So we're working more and we're tracking more, but if you're just a candidate, you're doing it for yourself, you can just track as many things as you can. In terms of our mentors who work with us, we're constantly working on this stage. This is one of the key things we do. This and the assignment of what technologies or what tutorials or what platforms should be passed to the mentee is two things that we are constantly working on, making it, refine it, make it better. So that our mentors with our platform can leverage a lot of available content that are out there. A lot of content is out there to their benefit and make their candidates win faster and land better jobs. Okay, so one of the key, so I'm going to go at these next few slides, give you a few advice on breaking for the candidates, and also some ideas of how our mentors work with our candidates. Interview harder is one of the key things. We keep telling them interview harder. Don't just flow with what they ask you. Like they ask me, what have you been working on? Okay, great. What are you able to relocate? Okay, great. How many years of Python Java do you have? Okay, great. Do you have any questions for me? No. No, we don't want that. You want to interview harder, be in charge of the process. The recruiter has a decision to make, and that's his decision. But that doesn't mean you have to just lay back and just see what happens here. It's nothing going to happen if you just do that. So that's one thing that especially younger talents who haven't been in the market, who haven't been working, don't understand. We do the screening call interviews and we go in different scenarios. Like we're going to talk about some of those in the next two. I'm going to talk about it in the next two slides. And how do you interview harder? One key idea is to motivate your recruiter. So, for example, my favorite is be assumptive that it's going to be a good interview. If you do a mock interview, a mock technical interview, so I've given here an example on the right, top right. We give like this is my favorite game theory kind of problems. One of my favorite examples. It's different than what most talents are used to coming out of college. Most of the time, it's very easy on college. You just identify what is needed, what is the input, what is the output. But most of the problem that you need to work on is actually you have to understand and figure out the rules. So it's one of my favorite examples that you create. It's a sort of a game theory example, and most of the time the candidates just give up, and that's what you don't want to do. Even if you do not know how to code, do not just be silent. The coding part is usually the last part. Before that comes into what are you actually doing? What are you actually designing and planning to code? What is your strategy? That's just you understanding the flow of data and being able to communicate it. That's not coding. So don't feel like, oh my God, I cannot code this. I'm not going to even talk about it anymore. So that's what I would want a talent to interview harder. A few ways to motivate a screening call recruiter is I put here, be something that's going to be great. Have a good attitude towards the conversation. During the conversation, be silent sometimes. Just listen. What is the actual question that the recruiter is asking you? Also, especially if you are technical, you might end up saying too much, and you might not have anything to say in the end. So do not oversell. You can do it if you switch to silence every now and then. That's my favorite skill, is to say silence. I also call it shotgun lesson. And that's something that reminds the recruiter that he's in charge of a decision, especially if you know that you're not the favorite, you're not the top 20%. That would be helpful because then you make him realize that, okay, there's a space that he can reevaluate his decision. Again, be indifferent. Do not keep trying to, hey, did you look at my resume? This one classic issue we want to clean. It's a habit to unlearn from most talents who um, haven't worked or haven't got a job, or haven't done much interviewing yet. Be indifferent. That's, again, it's very powerful to motivate your recruiter. It doesn't mean that you just got to be passive, but it does mean that if, for example, there was some issue that was raised, don't get too defensive right away. Again, this is something that you have to practice with somebody or people who you work with or know, and hone that new skill and that quality in your interview habits. So one of the, always every interview you ask is, there's a time that people ask you, do you have any questions? That's a great thing, you know, that it's going to happen to you. So what do you do for that? So that's one example that you can easily identify an experienced interviewer versus someone who is not, or someone who is not present in a conversation. Was a candidate who got it, who understood what happened in the last 5-10 minutes versus somebody who did not. It's a one of my favorite questions. So take that question very seriously. Again, that's we practice with candidates on what is a good answer, what is a bad answer. Especially technical talents sometimes have a hard time navigating through the screening call. Now, this screening call is common objections are preemptive objections is where you're, let's say, in the top 50% of the bracket, and you can easily understand that if you've interviewed long enough that you're not one of those top 20%. What would you do so that the person would change his mind? So that's a common objection that happens, or situation like you're too technical. It means like a lot of things, but most of the time it means you haven't worked long enough in a corporate setup. Teamwork experience, or the teams you work with were just some graduate research positions out of university, and we don't acknowledge that. There are a few others that I put here. Sometimes they just right away tell you that they are not interested, and you are still on the phone with them, right? So there is still a chance for you. Do not be like, okay, not interested. Oh my God, it's all right. Thank you so much for your time. No, you're still on the phone. Unless the person hang up on you, you're still on the phone. So not interested, you can still turn it around. And we work with our candidates with few different skills. At this point, it becomes pure sales in a way, because you are in charge. You have somebody who you want them to be interested in you or your resume, or look at your resume, and they just told you they're not interested. That's just a great thing for a salesperson to hear, because you just turn them on. You're just going to now be engaged. But if and that's the approach we want to have for a candidate. So that's one example. Again, you need to have an idea of why you do this. So we have a model for our objection handling model. So we ask our mentors who work with the interviewing, just reviewing this section, mentors who do the interview review and the resume review, that we want our candidates to be able to sell two things. One, their resume, the technical background, and second, themselves as a promising candidate. Okay. As a promising candidate who is humble and who is focused. So a few other qualities. So basically, we have that model and turning it around the conversation towards the decision that a recruiter can make for you on the technical side. Keep your fundamental skills in check. No matter how untechnical you are, no business wants to reinvent the wheel. Okay? If you come from a marketing background, if you come from pure non-technical background, still these are the same rules. Like, no business wants to reinvent the wheel. So in terms of how you communicate, with who you communicate, you need to know the translation that happens, the communication that goes into place, and know what are the standards that goes there. If there's some protocol that you need to know that. It's not about you figuring it out on the job. If it is a technical job, that's a lot easier. The CS science, the CS background comes in places, becomes very important. The CS fundamentals, especially for developer jobs, becomes very important. If you don't know how to perform certain type of searches on graphs, and you come up with that at your job, that's not a good sign. The qualified long-term team members is what every recruiter wants to get, not just a brainiac, not just a short-sighted talented found by luck. So you will be tested for algorithms. So test yourself with different levels of algorithm depending on what jobs you're applying to, or data structures, or classic topics like that. The products you're going to be working on, they're going to be, all these hires should be working on long-lasting products, specialized tools most of the time. Consulting cases are slightly different. If you're working with PwC, KPMG, that's slightly different. But even in those cases, you need to know that if you're doing in Python, what is the Pythonic way? What are the good practices to do it? So these are the fundamentals that you need to have yourself in check. Otherwise, like all the effort that you put in and you pass the screening call, the first technical person will just reject you because he looked at your code and he saw that it just not a good bet. So I'll give you two examples for tech mock interview. One of my favorite ones is to start with a very simple example, the first name, last name. I think I went over this part is like, what, for example, one example, you can track how a talented candidate is coding. Especially some, you can easily tell if the talent just thinks as his codes or not. You can tell so much by looking at the mock interview. It's very important. So I give you two examples here that are my favorite. I start with a very simple example of first name, last name, ask them to reverse it, and then I changed and update the expected outcome that I like to see, and I want to make them add new features, new functionalities into the existing codes, and look at the design that they develop over the time. With senior level candidates or people who've coded more and they can communicate the different concepts better, usually the process is that you spend a lot of time on navigating what ideas they have, how they can optimize it, make it better and better. And when they run out of ideas, then that's where we start coding. Okay, now we can code that. So these are two of my favorite styles of doing technical. Then there's also a whole setup of technical backgrounds that you can select on HackerRank and a few other HackerRank that we can make sure, for example, the person has like proper background and algorithms and APIs and so forth. And one of the problems with rise of APIs, which is the plot on the right, is that it's now harder to understand if the talent is actually a good programmer, good coder, is a hands-on coder, because there's now so many APIs, and you can very quickly put a portfolio, a website, a resume website, a Python notebook, all that, and it's harder for especially the non-technical recruiters to understand, or even technical people to understand how good and hands-on is a talent, or how good they can communicate the concepts and what matters, and so forth. So keep your fundamental skills in check, understand what those skills are if you don't, and have a way to evaluate yourself on those skills is basically the goal. All right, so with that, I'm 5 minutes late. I think we started a few minutes late too, and I started kind of slow. So it was pretty good timing. If there's any questions anybody has, I'm here to answer questions on how this is helpful to you as a candidate, or you could be a mentor or experts. You can ask your questions from. Just let me know what is if you're a candidate, or if you're a mentor, or if you're candidate already working with us. And I can probably answer your questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go over a few more slides and wrap it up there. right. Yeah, sure. I'm glad. I'm glad. Um, I can. So, sure. So one of the key things that, sure, I would say the most common things that the candidates use is a technical, like going back to the third slide. It is um, the technical training, the tested training, how to talk about it, um, and then the screening calls. So these two are the most important parts. Um, Creating a structure is key. I want to go just repeat that. Having some assumptions for yourself. Let's say we come up with these funny names. We have a catfish 100%. It's basically a case scenario where the talent has been working at Google for 8 years. In Canada, been working at Google US, Facebook US. So basically a perfect talent, and they want more. They want to have. They want to do something fun at Google. So they want to see what is out there, and there's always something you can work on. And if you're a talent like that, I hope you join us. There's a lot of things we can do together, but you can have different objectives for yourselves, like whether it's like a new job, a new role, and something exciting that you want to do on the side. I give you an example. Angel List is a great platform if you want to do like startups, or if you have like a senior level and you want to gain some experience and background in the startups in tech, or if you want to do some freelancing work. Yeah, so these case scenarios in the tech. Okay, so God, what do you have to say about growth mindset? As most people will say, it is very critical in your. So the growth mindset job. So I want to be clear about that. The growth mindset is basically learning more about what you're doing and learning more and getting new skills as for yourself as a talent in a company. Is that what you're referring to, right? Um, Okay, I'm going to assume that's a yes. So the way that we ask our candidates to grow professionally is very simple. If you're working at a company, at a job right now, um, we ask you to extend yourself. Now, what do you mean by extending? Extending is like you talk to your manager, or if you work at a level that you have bonus structure, all that, you already know what that means. But basically, you want to do a little bit more than what you do. Extend what your job functionality into new fields and new territories. If you're just a business intelligence and you're doing a data visualization with Tableau all the time, the extension means that now you come and work with people on a front end that provide you the data, and you want to learn and help them with something. Let's say the API that gets the data and dumps it there on data lakes that is later passed out to the Tableau. So find some solution that will save your team some time and some hassle, and you're going to make allies in the team, and you're going to start working on new technology stack that you were not working before. If you're not working at a company and you're talking about learning and doing something interesting, different, or learning new skills, or if you're working at a job that is not what you want to grow into, then the best way is to work with somebody like us. That a platform like us is very lightweight, is heavily focused on connecting you with professionals and leveraging existing tutorials and platforms. And we don't charge anything. We're completely free until you land a job. So it's honestly, it's my honest best advice. That's what we do. Okay, and most recruiters will look out for most candidates who has the growth mindset. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the growth mindset that you can, absolutely, yeah. So the angel list jobs, there are you can very simply create a job on AngelList as a startup. It's free. That's actually where we have our jobs too, on AngelList, PhillyTalent. And it's very convenient to track candidates and push them along the pipeline. There are a lot of platforms that you can use in order to post jobs, and they are very expensive, and AngelList is not. So, but their focus and their community is the startups. So a lot of the narratives there is about equity. It's beyond the hourly rate conversation. So it's not good for talents who do not have any working experience, unless they want to, let's say, use it as a freelancing platform. I've seen that with some talents, to use it as a freelancing platform, and as you start a new job, to use it as a freelancing platform. To talk with a person who is, because you're not talking to a recruiter, you're not talking to an HR, you might be directly talking to the operation officer, chief operation officer. So it's a different type of conversation and negotiation and level of dealing and managing the whole routine. But you can use it if you're entry level as to land freelancing job. Offer some of your time. Pass on an interesting project that is very relevant to their data set that they're working on, and offer something for free. Like, hey, I'm gonna work here for 1 week on this project for free. I'll do it for free for you. No, you don't need to pay me anything. Something that you can give away, and at the same time, you're gonna build something up valuable for yourself. Do not do it, and I say to my mentees all the time, do not do it for experience, for resume. Do not do anything for resume. See where you are standing, what jobs you're qualified for, and go for them. Then that's one to few ways of leveraging AngelList. Bullet points. If you want to get the attention of me, bullet points. Like the same way that I presented here. Just get to the point right away. Avoid any kind of apologetic conversation. Hey, I'm really happy to talk to you here. Thank you so much for your time. No. Nobody, especially on AngelList, people don't have that time to go through that. And you're not going to help or boost anybody's ego. They usually have a lot of tight deadlines and a lot of bigger things to deal with, so they will not like it. So get to the point directly. See tell me what problems you've been working on, why it's a good problem you think, all right? And then tell me about the solution that you are putting out there to solve that problem and why it is unique to you. And boom, you get my attention, anybody's attention. But for the job market, it's not always about the attention, it's really numbers game. Okay, so you have to have the minimum requirements, pass the requirements, apply to as many jobs that are fit for you, and boom, you get the job you want. It's not the attention problem, and is exactly what we want to solve. Like making you stand out, specialize your profiles, your LinkedIn, your resume, your GitHub, or for specific tools. Make them use them properly, and you will stand out. You will stand out just by using them properly and the right way. Have a great, simple GitHub repository that is not just a bunch of homeworks there, and you will stand out. Because 90% of people are just their homework on GitHub. 90% of LinkedIn is just, I'm interested to do data science enthusiast. So just put your last name, last place that you worked out, and the title of university that you worked in, and you're helping me as a recruiter, and you stand out. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I will get a version of this presentation, PDF files, and send it to everybody who was here. And I hope I see you and my team. I hope we all see you in the following up webinars. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.